This podcast is part of the Pull Up a Chair podcast network. Let's build community through connection, conversation, and collaboration.
What does it mean to be happy? 'Cause it looks like we all don't know. Glass half full or empty. Man, we just putting on a show.
Welcome to How's That Working For You Season 2. It's your girls Kat and V, but this time we're taking deeper dives into mental health and breaking stigmas. So get ready because things are about to get real and personal.
Hey Kat, what's up?
So last week we talked a little about me, but I am so much more interested in hearing about you.
Oh God. I guess my mental health journey started when I was like a little kid, and I'm talking elementary school kid. So my dad died when I was really young, and prior to him dying, my mom and my dad split up. They were never married. I was kind of a love child, and my mother was like with somebody else at that point. I was always kind of like a pawn in their fighting growing up. So I always had a lot of anxiety around feeling unwanted and feeling used and feeling like a possession when I was like a little kid. Like I never felt like I was a human being. And that's something I still struggle with today, feeling like I am a person who deserves space. If they were mad at each other, I knew about it. If they were happy with each other, I knew about it. It was really hard for me. And then when he died, my mother it felt like she didn't have a purpose for me. And so I kind of bounced around after that, and I really wondered why he died and I didn't die, because he mattered to people and I didn't matter to anybody.
Oh my God, stop. But keep going.
So I was always a very like anxious child, and I was also a very sensitive child. And sensitivity does not fly in my family. You get torn to shreds. So I was always told to never cry in front of people. And that's something I still struggle with. Like showing any emotion aside from positivity and excitement and happiness is not something that I am very good at doing. Except for anger. I'm very good at showing when I'm pissed off. That's something that I still work on it. Like my anger issues are like, that's aside. I don't think I have any more anger issues than anybody else that had like went through my situation as a child. And like the one exception to all that was like my grandmother, who loved me deeply and made me feel like a person and a special person, and overfed me and really gave me my like love eating. Like her and I, we would watch TV and eat together. And that was like the happiest I could remember being as a child. And to this day, food is my happy place. Especially cheese. I have a problem with cheese.
It's funny because I can't eat cheese. Every time I come visit you, it's just like
You judge my eating habits. It's okay. Everybody judges my eating habits because like I wouldn't say
I don't judge your eating habits. Let's stop talking about the eating habits.
Okay, well, see, I can talk about food. It's talking about the other things that's hard. But then she died of cancer, and a long, painful fight with cancer. Like, my dad, his death was sudden and unexpected. Like, when he died, like, the day before he died, we went to see a movie. He dropped me off at my mom's, and, like, 6 hours later, an uncle came to pick me up because my dad was dead. Like, it didn't really register to me. And it was also my first time dealing with death, and so it kind of gave me, like, an unhealthy view of death. And so then when my grandmother was slowly dying of cancer, it was like, she went to the hospital, and they're like, girl, you got a week left. And so she came home, and she made it, like, a month. And then, in a week, she's like, her death took like a week to actually happen. First, it started with she couldn't really eat, or she didn't really want to eat. She didn't really have an appetite. And then she didn't really want to drink anything. And then she stopped talking. And then it was like 3 days. And it was really hard. Because her and I shared a bedroom at that point. Like, I had been living in a bedroom with her for like 3 years. We shared a dresser. We had one dresser that we shared. And so when she died, everybody was kicked out of the room, and it's like, where am I supposed to go? Like, honestly, like, where the fuck am I supposed to go? And then they started taking her clothes out of the dresser. Sorry.
It's okay.
I don't talk about her a lot for this reason, because it's hard.
I'm here. So important to talk about it, though.
And, after she died, my mom really disappeared then. After my grandmother died, I did not hear from my mother for 3.5, almost 4 years. And I bounced from place to place because it's like, I was talked about from like aunts and cousins like I was a pet. Like, oh, has anybody remembered to feed her or taken her out lately?
Oh my God. My opinions are different.
And they would do it with me in the room. And by that point, I was a teenager. I had this other aunt who would remind me that I only got to live there out of their goodwill, and that if I ever did anything to upset them or disappoint them, that they'd kick me out. And like later in life, like her and I have talked about it, and she's like, oh, I just wanted to motivate you to be a good person. And it's like, I did not feel loved or wanted anywhere. So, I was in high school and I was a troubled teenager. I did not have any friends. I was bullied severely because at that point I was in and out of a leg brace because I was also diagnosed with cerebral palsy when I was like 10, and I was in physical therapy until I was like 19 to walk. And walking is still something that I struggle with today, especially with weight gain. Like, that makes it even harder for me to walk. And so I just like wondered, like, if there is a God out there, he's an asshole because he shouldn't design people like me, or he's bad at his job, like one of the two. I wouldn't say I was really religious, but I was really spiritual, and I did a lot of deep, meditations, because I was like trying to understand why in the world the universe would design a person that struggled so much with just daily life. And it was really tough for me. So needless to say, I developed major depressive disorder, which is the only actual diagnosis I ever got for my mental health condition, is major depressive disorder, which is to be expected with the amount of death and struggle that I had been through. I paid for my own phone. I paid for my car. Like, I paid for all of my needs when I was really young. And so when I hit college, I was already in the mindset of, I need to take care of me because nobody else cares, because I'm not a person. And that's just like the mindset I had my whole life. So when I was in college, I was double majored for most of it, and I got a third one later on, and I juggled 2 part-time jobs all the way through college. And I started in college doing therapy, like mental therapy. I wanted to be a psychologist or a psychiatrist. Those were my 2 outcomes. So I took a whole bunch of classes on mental health disorders and family therapy and diagnoses. And one of my professors in college said that I probably had generalized anxiety disorder. I was never formally diagnosed with generalized anxiety, but if you know the way I act in my day-to-day life, it kind of makes sense. A good example of that is me with driving. I was in a car accident as a teenager, as many teenagers are. I lived, obviously, I'm fine. But whenever I see a big truck, my whole body will tremble, and only if I am driving. Like, if I'm a passenger in a car, it's not that bad. And if I'm walking, or if it drives by me and I'm on the street, I'm fine. But if I am like driving or in the passenger seat, I'll start to like tremble, like physically tremble. And I'll have a hard time talking or really thinking straight. And, I drive. I have to. And that's always my mindset. Because my whole family's mentality is push through it and seem like you're happy.
Oh my God.
So what I would always do whenever I felt like that, whenever I felt like I was going to melt down, is I put on a smile, or I'd get angry and I would just force my way through it. Which isn't the greatest, because even now I have a hard time talking about what I've been through and what my life is and who I am as a person.
I mean, let's just make it clear to the listeners here is that, like, you haven't even really talked about this a whole lot, like, to me.
No.
Like, So it's just like, I'm hearing this like new, like with everyone else too. I mean, I know little bits and pieces of it, but this is like next level, and I appreciate that.
It's really hard. My husband and I, like, his family is full of therapists. His father is a shrink, and he's fucking good at it. Like, his father is really good at making you say stuff that you're not ready to say. So for my husband, like, he's an open book. He'll talk about stuff with you, and he says that it's really a fight for me to talk about my current feelings. And it's true. It was really nailed into me as a child that you don't speak unless you were spoken to, and whatever you say better be positive, because I don't want to hear any sass. And the only way I would get out of it is either getting into a fight or being quiet. So I have two modes. I have quiet V and I have angry V. And those are like the two sides of me that people see.
I can think of other sides.
Well, yeah, because you're my best friend, and you see like half naked V, you showed my ass in a wedding dress, like you've seen it all.
Keep going, sorry. I just had to.
So when I was going through my huge bout in high school, when I was going through my big stint in my major depressive disorder, nobody really noticed that there was anything wrong with me. Nobody noticed that I was having suicidal thoughts, but I was not having suicidal tendencies, which are two different things. So I was thinking about death, but I wasn't thinking of putting myself to death.
We talked a little bit about that last week.
Yeah, we did.
But you put a term to it, and I appreciate that.
I learned about it. I learned about it in school. I'm not a licensed therapist, but I do have maybe a fourth of the education that a licensed therapist would have. So when I finally came out of it, I still behaved very similarly. And when I was in college, I did my thesis on my experiences with depression, and I had an aunt who came down to see it, and she's all like, I didn't know you were depressed. Like, when was this? And it was like, maybe when I got kicked out of my only home and thrown around between people. But I can't blame her, because I wasn't showing any outward symptoms because I was keeping all of my feelings and emotions to myself, because that's what I was taught to do. And that's why it's hard to diagnose a person with mental illness, because it's not just the mental illness that affects the way that they behave, it's also their upbringing. My upbringing does affect me to my everyday life. I don't want to get too deep, but I was abused in a lot of ways as a child, and I show those symptoms like very prominently in the way that I express my anger, in the way that I don't trust people.
Yeah, it actually took you so long to even believe that I would like stay friends with you.
Oh yeah, no, I have a lot of abandonment issues because, I have parents that come in and out of my lives for death and other reasons, and so I just assume that people aren't going to stay around. I assume that people don't care about me. I assume that if people do take an interest in me, it's for bad purposes, and I know in my brain that isn't correct, but try telling my heart that. It's not quite that easy.
Yeah.
And then also I have a lot of bravado from my family. Like, I don't want to tell people that I'm physically disabled. Hell no, I don't want to mention that I'm mentally ill. Like, those are two things that you don't tell people. You hide that. And so because I'm doing like my best to hide what I'm struggling with, I get really nervous that people are going to find out. And then I get really nervous that I'm going to mess something up or drop the ball and then be all alone. And so...
Feel this way?
Yes and no. And this comes in with my whole story of like getting through it or like getting healthier. It's when I was in high school, I did get diagnosed, but I didn't get on medication. I just did a little bit of talk therapy, which helped to an extent. But I was also afraid of my therapist because he looked like a person who had abused me. He had a very similar facial structure and everything. So I wasn't completely being open with him, but I had no other options at the time. So it was this or nothing. And so I went into college and I had a little bit more support, but not a lot because I was afraid. I was afraid to get help because I was afraid people were going to find out that there's something wrong with me, that my brain's broken. And that's the way I always thought of it. I always thought that I was a broken person my whole life. And that's still something I joke about. Like, oh yeah, my brain's broken, haha.
Yeah, I think it's healthy to deal with it with humor. Yeah, I think that's something that we have in common, is that like a lot of people kind of told us we were broken.
Yeah.
Like, and it's just like, and it's so empowering and just inspiring to see you open up. Because I think that I've always been easier to do that. Like for me, it's a little easier, but for you, it's just like you're opening up about a lot of things that I didn't even really, I knew about to an extent. But you're really telling everyone right now, like letting it all out.
People could see me on screen right now because we're zooming this too. I am like shaking and fidgeting, and it's making me so uncomfortable to talk about.
It's just like, even me as your best friend, vulnerability isn't something that like I know comes naturally to you.
Oh, no, not at all.
Been, like the strong, like just super strong and stable, and that's just, I know that you weren't always that way, but like that's who I've known you as since we've really become friends. And it's hard to be vulnerable like this, and you didn't even tell me about your, like when your grandmother passed away, like to that extent either. Like I kind of knew, but for you to explain it in such like vivid detail was so powerful.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it's just like, I love that you're sharing this about yourself, because it's like you're acknowledging everything that you've gone through. And I feel like, and I'm sure your husband will agree with me, it's like you forget that you've gone through all of this stuff and come back like just stronger than anyone I've ever met in my life.
I would say more awkward than strong, but you know, I'll take the compliment.
Like V doesn't accept compliments very well. You will notice this over time.
Well, no, that also stems back to my childhood, because whenever somebody would give me a compliment, it would come with either a demand or a real gash, because people in my family, backhanded compliments are just how we interact with each other. Like my wedding, perfect example. My grandfather went up there, did not talk about my relationship at all, but talked about other people's problems in our family. That's the perfect representation of my family. I don't care what you are going through or your moment. I'm going to tell you about what I think about everybody else and take this moment to be special myself.
What I think is so amazing about you as an individual, V, is that like you came from a family of like the most selfish people I've ever heard of and met in my entire life. Yet you've come out and become like this incredibly selfless individual. Like even though these people in your life were so cruel to you, you still give them the most that you can because you care about them. I don't know why.
While we're on the topic of my family, I honestly can't tell you when, but at some point I became the unofficial family therapist.
Yeah.
And it's something I'm happy to do. If somebody wants to vent to me and ask for advice from somebody who took psychology classes, I'll be more than happy to give it to you. I might not always say something that they like to hear, but I'll do it, and I'm more than happy to do it. And there's, I don't know, like a rotation of like 10 people that'll call me for a moment like that. It's honestly been fine for me until I think it was like maybe 2 months ago, somebody crossed a line where they tried to take and twist my words. And it really pissed me off to the point where I told them and the person they were talking to, it's like, hey, I can't talk to you guys anymore. Not until you learn to take me with respect. And of course, both of them twisted that too. Like, oh, well, I'm sorry that I even asked for your help. And it's like, no, it's not the fact that I'm here helping, because I'm fine. I love helping. I don't mind it. But when you use me as a weapon, it brings me right back to when I was 7 years old and told, well, who do you actually love? Who do you actually want to live with? Because if you don't love me, I don't love you. And that's more than I can handle, honestly.
And I think that, like, honestly, V, you don't really have that much, like, it takes a lot to push you over the edge. Like, you have such tolerance for bullshit. It's like you're like the epitome of like somebody who lets shit happen and just like, okay, this is my life now.
Yeah, no, when something bad happens, I'm like, well, it's not gonna be like this forever. It'll be better tomorrow. Like, no matter how bad it is, too. Like, when my car got stolen, I was like, well, it'll either be found or not found. I'm not gonna stress out about it.
Oh my god. I think we'll talk more about this in the Cat and V show, episode 1. We've got to talk about the first week where we lit a fire to our friendship was like the most chaotic week ever.
I'm honestly, if there is a disaster or a tragedy going on, I'm the kind of person you want on your team to help fix it. Because stuff doesn't hit me until later. Like, I'll go through fire and then I'll say ouch once I'm on the other side. It was like, oh, that was painful. At least it's over.
Like, you don't panic until later.
Yeah.
Like, it's like...
I don't panic until I'm alone. And then when I panic, it's like I'm in the bathtub having an anxiety attack. And it's like, but that's over with. And it's like, I know it's over with. That's why I'm in the bathtub.
Oh my god. Yeah.
Because my anxiety attacks are awful, and then they usually set off my epilepsy, and then I have a seizure, and then it's like, well,
yeah. Oh my god. Like, let's just talk about like more of just, man, the cards were so stacked against you. It's just like, you talked about your history, but then on top of your traumatic history with family, there's like physical disabilities that are just like beyond. I can't go tell them.
God, yeah, no, so I have cerebral palsy, which means that a part of my brain didn't develop fully when I was, developing in the womb. And usually people with cerebral palsy, their muscles don't develop. You'll see them in wheelchairs. They're 100% mentally there, mentally capable. Their bodies just aren't working properly. I have a very mild case, and looking at me, I do pass as able-bodied, but my mobility is limited. My stamina is limited. I also occasionally have really bad seizures, and it's usually triggered by stress.
Oh my god.
I also have the worst case of dyslexia that I think can exist. Not the worst, but it's pretty bad. My dyslexia is pretty bad.
I'm laughing because it's just like, I feel like I'm one of the immediate people to deal with it.
Oh yeah, it's Kat. Between Kat and my husband, like, everything I send out is always like double checked by one of them, because you can't trust me. You can't trust me to write my own name correctly, much less anything important.
We've got to talk about dyslexia. We will talk. You're going to talk about it, right?
Yeah, I will talk about that. So that also made me feel so stupid growing up. Like, because, there'd be spelling tests until like the 7th grade. You would have spelling tests, and I would fail. I would always, like, straight up fail the spelling tests.
We've got to talk about that.
And so I just felt like I was the most stupid person ever. But then I did okay at math. I would occasionally forget what a 6 was and what a 9 was. And so I'd make some really weird math mistakes. It was bad, but I would do really well in like science. Like, the teachers were not understanding why I was maybe I was careless. I don't know. So I spent my whole time thinking I was dumb, even though I was making, like, I came out of high school with a 4.2 GPA average. I took all AP classes my senior year. But I always felt dumb because I was always making these very simple spelling mistakes. And I swear to God that I read it, I double checked it, I put it through spell check, and like, it looked right. I was looking at it and it would look right. And then they would write on my test that Monday was spelt wrong. Monday's not spelt with an A, spelt with an O. And I'm like, I'm looking at that and that is an O, right? No, wait, no, that's an E.
It's so crazy because all of your mistakes are so consistent, and it's because you think things are shaped the same way. And it's just like crazy. Sometimes I just sit there and I'm like, I just need to rewrite this. Let me just rewrite this for you. It's okay. There's nothing wrong with you. I just need to rewrite it.
So it was just like my brain was broken. I couldn't spell for the life of me, and I didn't want to ask for help. During all that, I felt like such a phony. Like, oh my God, I'm so dumb. How am I getting these grades? How am I getting through it? Like,
oh my God,
this is ridiculous. And it would make me feel worse and sad. Like, oh, there's people out there who are actually smart, and I'm so dumb getting all these good grades. And then I would get anxious. Like, oh my God, what if I get found out? What if they find out I'm not actually smart? And so it was just this awful feedback loop.
You had such a deep-rooted sense of, like, low self-esteem from just, it stems from like so far back that you can't even, like, you don't even, sometimes you don't even realize you're doing it. But
yeah, no, it was really rough. And so what I did was I took something that I was confident in, my looks, and I played it up.
I remember this. Oh my god.
And oh my god, there were so many rumors in our college about how I was such a hoe and a skank because I dressed up. Like, fuck it, I look good.
But what, didn't you like only have sex with like 2 people? Like,
no, only one, my fucking husband.
oh my god, yeah, you're right. No, but like,
we're married now. Like, I've only ever been intimate with one person, but everybody thought I was such a slut.
I mean, I'll be honest with you. It was just like your shirts were like and it's not just the fact that like what you were wearing was skimpy. It was the fact that you had such large assets.
Yeah,
that made it even more.
Well, see, even if I wore something modest, it might not look modest on me. And so if I wore something youthful that would show a normal girl's cleavage, it used to show a lot of cleavage on me, more than I think the shirt was designed for.
Like I mean, you got Latin features, but then you also had like the framework of like, you said it was because of cerebral palsy, where like...
Yeah, so I also have a curved spine, and so it pushes my breasts out farther than they are, and my hips and butt out farther than they should be. And so I just kind of have an S-curved spine, and so it makes it look like I'm a lot curvier than I am. And especially if I'm not like...
You're already pretty curvy though. Like...
And so one thing like I really kept from the physical therapy is holding my shoulders back and having good posture. And when you have good posture, it also pushes everything out further.
Oh my gosh.
So I've started like hunching over a lot since then to like make myself seem smaller. But in college, I was letting it all hang out. And if somebody talked shit about me, I was like, oh yeah, totally, right?
Yeah, I mean, like, it's so funny because I feel like I was one of the few people that didn't...
Which is why I liked you, because you didn't just assume shit about me.
I saw you and I was like, wow, she's like very, very confident.
Which I was. I had all the confidence. I walked into the room with all the swagger.
It was, yeah. I mean, it truly, like, I was more interested in what was, like, I was more interested in you than like the rest of it, I guess. Like, I don't know. There was like, I feel like there was a lot more to V than just the fact that she dressed like skimpily. Like, it was just, there was so much more. Like, I had asked you, I remember having this conversation because I didn't really know how to approach it. But I remember asking you because when like people don't notice it right away, but like if you spend a little bit extra time with you, it's like you do walk on your toes because, you can explain to them the muscle structure.
So the muscles on my legs aren't completely developed, and so the length of my bone is longer than the length of my muscle. So when you're standing flat-footed, that's basically me on my toes. And so I can now walk flat-footed, but it takes the extra effort. So whenever I'm tired or I've been walking too much, or I'm just like really overwhelmed, I'll get up on my toes because it's a more natural, comfortable position for me. And when I was in college, I was always stressed out, so I was always on my toes.
Yeah, so like you just looked like you were tiptoeing everywhere. And I remember asking you, I was like, hey, like, I don't remember exactly what I said, but I tried to be the most respectful as I could be.
You're like, hey, if you feel comfortable talking about it, is there a reason you walk the way that you walk up on your toes like that?
Yeah, I just like...
And then you left it like this long pause, like, ooh, I hope I didn't say anything wrong.
I just didn't know. I mean, I was just... Here's the thing about me when I was like... I was so curious, you know? I was always a curious person, and I just don't... Like, when I saw you walk like that, and it just, like, I knew that it was probably pain-related, you know? Because, like, you don't just walk like that for no reason. So I just really wanted to understand where you were coming from with that, so...
Yeah.
And that was just one of the very brief interactions we had in college.
Well, see, for me, I remember feeling caught off guard, but in a good way. Because up to that point, like the couple people that have noticed it, it was usually like, why are you trying to make yourself look taller? oh, do you wear high heels so much you're just not used to walking in regular shoes? It was always something judgmental. And we went to a very privileged college, and I only got there because of scholarships, because I did really good in high school. But because they were so privileged, and I did come from a rougher background, I grew up in the ghettos of the Bay Area, and I had a lot more roughness to me. I wasn't as friendly as I am now. And so people thought of me as the slutty ghetto girl. And I would just, like, I was letting them think that. I wasn't trying to prove anybody wrong. And so the fact that you just saw me as a person meant so much. And it was like, oh, you're honestly curious on why I'm different. You're not just making an assumption. It really meant a lot to me. Because up to that point in my life, like, people just made assumptions about me. And I'm not really a person, so who cares if they think that about me? I feel like why I was so willing to open up to you, because you did just treat me like a person right off the bat.
I don't know. I think it just came from, like, similarly, a lot of people made assumptions about me too. Yeah.
Oh yes, there's a lot of rumors about you that I remember hearing about. I was just like, I don't know, she doesn't seem like that, so this is probably made up.
Towards the end of my college experience, I wasn't even on campus a whole lot. So it was just, I feel like the misfits at Dominican kind of found each other, and we would hang out with each other. Like, you and I, we hung out with each other. Not a lot, but we did hang out with each other when we were on campus, and we would bond a little bit over that. But we never were like super, super close. And I feel like that was a pattern with misfits, was like, you guys, there were friends, but there weren't like super like close knit friends.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of support. I really felt that, and I don't feel like I really hit my stable point in my emotional stableness until after college, because I was going through bouts of depression throughout college, and of course I seemed normal to the whole outside, and nobody cared to really check in on me because I didn't have a close support network. And then out of college, I did start experimenting with antidepressants and all of that, but I feel like when I was taking the medication, it made me feel like I wasn't myself, but not in a good way. Because right now, the way I feel now, because I'm a stable person now, is not the way I would have felt back then. I would have felt like a different person. But the way I behaved and reacted to the medication reminded me of my mother. And this is something, I don't know if we talked about it last week, but my mother also has bipolar 2, just like Kat, but my mother never got help. And so the fact that I reminded myself of my mother during her stable bouts freaked me out, because bipolar is something hereditary, and I was at the age where onset can still happen. It scared me, and not that I was scared that the medication was going to cause it, but I was worried that maybe that's what was wrong with me. And I found other ways to cope, and I found actual real coping mechanisms. And because it's mostly like brain chemical stuff that's wrong with me, and I'm no longer in the environments that triggers me, I'm able to be stable now. And I really do advocate for people to try medication and try a couple different to figure out what's wrong with them, but be okay if you need to be taken off, because everybody's recovery story and journey is different. And I feel like that's something that often gets overlooked. They're like, oh, we'll just go on medication, you'll be fine. And it's like, that's not how it works. For me, it really is all about the environment. I need to live somewhere stable. I need to be able to control when I leave the house, because sometimes if I'm in, especially with what I'm going to assume I have generalized anxiety, if I'm in an anxious headspace, I might have a panic attack in my car and not be able to drive and throw up all over myself or all over the car and get dizzy and feel heart palpitations. Like, it's bad. It can get really bad when I'm in a panic. And then after panic, I always get hit with just this heaviness where getting out of bed and brushing my teeth is almost more than I can handle.
It's hard. It's not like...
It really is. Like,
I've seen little bits and pieces of it. Like, it's because I lived with you for like 2 weeks straight. So I saw like a lot of me that I didn't know like existed.
And it's just like, I have a hard time showing that side of myself because I am so good at faking it. At faking being okay and faking being strong.
I don't think it's faking being strong. You just are strong. And whether it feels fake or not, though, like it's we talked about this before. It's like strength has nothing to do with how you appear at all. It's how you deal with it, you know? And I feel like you weren't faking it. You just were strong in your own way. And then like there was, you struggled with vulnerability, but that doesn't mean you weren't strong, you know?
Oh no, it's all hard because if I look at, the way I react in a crisis, because like when I say in the environment, it takes a lot to get me to that point. Because a lot can happen to me before I have a break, but when I have a break, I am so helpless. And that's what scares me. Because I could like, I don't know, lose my job, get kicked out of the house, and I'm fine. Yeah, I'm homeless. Big deal. I got this. But if one of my triggers happens, I am completely helpless. And that honestly terrifies me. That how can I deal with something scary like being jobless and not having a place to go? Fine. But one of my triggers, and I'm not going to ever talk about my triggers because I know that I have a couple people who listen to this who would like to trigger me because that's how my family is.
If you could see me, I'm like rolling my eyes so far into the back of my skull. Her family sucks. Like,
yeah, and my triggers are, from my point of view, small. And so the fact that something small can make me so helpless is terrifying. And it's not about a cure for me. It's just, this is how my brain works. This is how my brain functions. I have a broken brain. And thankfully,
it's not broken, but okay.
I have a partner, my husband, who is very good at picking up on my triggers and pulling me out of my situations and is able to see that I'm having emotional problems before I even know that I'm having emotional problems. Like, he's very intuitive about these kind of things. And
Michael's a unicorn.
Yeah, he's a unicorn.
So how are you feeling now after having talked about all that?
I feel pathetic. And that's something that I roll back to. It's like, I should be stronger than I am, and I'm pathetic that I'm not.
Well, okay, so this is why we're talking about it, and this is why I'm your friend, and I'm going to tell you that you are so far from pathetic. Like, the way that you were able to open up and talk about all of these things is one of the strongest and most, like, resilient and just vulnerable, like, being able to open up to that vulnerability that so many people are afraid of touching on is such a strong characteristic. And like, I am so grateful that you were able to share that with me and with like our audience, like our listeners. And I honestly, I was just listening to this and it's just like, wow, this, like, you are one of the most unbelievable people I've ever met in my life. Like, you have gone through so much shit. You didn't even touch on the fact that, like, you grew up in the actual ghetto. Like, you kind of did.
I mean, I touched on it.
But, like, you grew up in the actual ghetto and then somehow graduated from a 4-year university in 3.5 years with 3 bachelor's degrees. 3 degrees. Not just like a minor or anything. 3 whole undergraduate degrees. I don't know how, like, that is such an incredible story. Like, somebody should write a movie on that, and somebody will, I'm sure. I know that you like yourself, but there are pieces of you that, like, I can hear when you're saying, you're telling your story, that we just need to work on you liking those bits of yourself too. What would you say to high school V?
God.
You did this to me, so I'd do it to you.
Yeah, this one's hard. Well, I would remind her that even if you don't feel like a person that matters, you'll matter to somebody someday. But even if you never mattered to nobody, you mattered to yourself.
I like that.
Yeah. So,
But you absolutely mattered to people. You mattered.
I mean, I do now.
Oh, stop it. Oh my gosh. All right, so follow us on all of our socials, which will be linked in the description of this podcast, and we will see you next week. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Oh, you know, I try to find a
Want to help support the Pull Up a Chair podcast network? Donations keep this show and others in our lineup going. All donations are tax deductible. Links with more information can be found in the description of this podcast.
Hello, I'm Patrick.
And I'm Andrew.
And I'm Christian.
And I'm Allie.
And we are Rad Theater, a podcast where a bunch of friends play role-playing games and share a single brain cell, and the GM doesn't always have it. Oh, and it's theater spelled the correct way, Theatre.